Hi, this is Karen Devers, and I'd like to share with you how to make a cotton face mask. I've made several of these, and they've evolved over time. Each one has been a little bit better, I think. So what I'm offering to you now is the best of what I have, at least at this point in time. With this pattern that I'm going to show you and the instructions, you can make two different versions of the cotton face mask. One of them uses fusible interfacing, has a nose wire and ties, and the other one does not have the interfacing, but it has an opening where you could insert a non-woven piece of cloth, or some people use coffee filters. You can use a piece of paper towel. It also has a nose wire and ties. But I do want to say that if you don't have the wire available or the right gauge, just make the mask anyway. That way you'll get an idea of how it fits your face and if you need to make adjustments. Also, choose fabric that will stand up to multiple washing and drying cycles, because every time you wear it out in public, when you come home, you're going to want to wash it with soap and water at the same time that you're washing your hands. Here are the materials that you need to make a mask. Cotton fabric, and be sure and wash and dry it hot before cutting the size that you'll need for your mask. Fusible interfacing for light to medium fabric. Muslin, this also needs to be washed and dried before you're doing the cutting. And note that ribbon or seam tape might work. I've not used it, but for the ties. Whatever you use, it needs to stand up to multiple wash and dry cycles. And I like using the muslin because I can cut the strips from one selvage end to the other selvage. That way I have nice unfrayed edges at the very end where I'm going to put a knot to tie the tie. And also wire, 26 gauge is what I've found works really well, and I actually double it. And there's a reason why I cut a longer strip and double it, and you'll see that when we get more into it. Here are the tools that you need. First of all, a sewing machine. Now you could hand sew the mask, but it would be difficult because there's some layers that might be challenging. Thread, of course, pins, pen, and a white pencil or some kind of pencil with light graphite. If you don't have it, fine, you don't have it, but you'll see when I'm making the marks on the fabric, if the fabric is dark, then a pen doesn't show up very well. And of course, scissors that are good for fabric, wire cutter, and a ruler, a yardstick, or tape measure, if that's what you prefer. And of course, an iron. Okay, let's get started. First of all, you need to wash your fabric and the muslin, of course, in hot water. Run it dry, hot cycle, if you've got that, and also be sure to iron it flat. It might get a little wrinkled after it's gone through the wash and the dry. And it's important that you do that because you don't want any shrinkage after you've made your mask, and also you want to make sure you do the wash and dry before you do any cutting. To cut out a paper template, 8 inches by 7.5 inches, I just use a regular piece of print paper, copy paper that's in my printer. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy at all. If you're going to use a wire nose piece, this is a good time to go ahead and make that. It is optional. If you don't have the wire or don't want to do this, you certainly don't have to. Cut a piece of 26 gauge wire 8 inches in length. Then fold one end over to a bit less than half. Twist the wire and leave a small loop at the folded end. Fold the other end over so it slightly overlaps the first folded end. Twist the wire and leave a small loop at that end as well. Bend the wire so the overlapped ends are as smooth as possible. You can see from the example here that one wire has a very tight join where the two ends were folded over, and the other one, there's a little bit sticking out. So I'm going to need to go back in and twist that so that it's smoother. Otherwise, it might poke through the fabric. Well, your fabric is all washed and dried and ironed, so you're to go ahead and use your template and cut out the pieces for your mask. As you can see from the illustration, I work on several masks at the same time. I find that this is an easy way to do it, but certainly you can just work on one mask at a time. The template is 8 inches by 7.5 inches. Place the template on the fold of your fabric so that the width is 7.5 inches. After cutting, the length of your fabric piece will be 16 inches. You don't need to put the interface on the fold. Just cut one 8 inches by 7.5 inches. If you're making the version that uses the interfacing, I really prefer to use the fusible interfacing, which means that you can iron it on. So when you do that, it's hard sometimes to see what is the sticky side of the interfacing, but I find when I hold it under the light and I look at both sides, that one side has little dots on it that are just a tiny bit raised, and I can feel that, and that is the sticky side. So go ahead and see if your interfacing has that. You'll want to iron it onto the wrong side of the fabric. You should have a longer piece of fabric for your mask, and then the interfacing fabric is half of that. Iron the facing onto 1/2 of the wrong side of your mask fabric. With the right sides still together, fold in half and then pin the top so that the right sides are together. You're going to sew that top seam using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Sew all the way across if you've got the interface version. If you're making a version that doesn't have interfacing and has an opening, go ahead and pin that and leave a 2-inch opening in the middle. In the photograph, you can see I've left an opening on the interface. That's just because it's easier to see. I'm going to go back and sew all the way across on the interface version. Now turn your fabric right side out and go ahead and press it flat. Iron the interfacing version with the seam at the very top of the mask. But if you're working with the open version, you want to pull that seam down just a little bit. 1/2 inch should be fine. So it's about 1/2 inch lower from the top of the mask. Take a look at your pattern. Make sure that the pattern is going in the way that you want it, because the little opening that you're leaving is going to go on the inside towards your face. So whatever's on the other side is going to be what's facing out. If you have a pattern that has to go a certain way, make sure you pay attention to that. Mark the fold lines on the right sides of your fabric. For this fabric, because it's dark, I had to use the white pencil. If your fabric pattern is light, then you could use a pen or even a pencil or a Sharpie, something like that. Just make small marks. Start from the bottom and measure 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch, so that you have 6 marks on each side. In order to make the folds, start at the bottom, and the first mark that you made on the sides, that folds up to the second mark, and the third mark folds up to the fourth, and the fifth mark folds up to the sixth. Then pin them in place. I usually iron it down just to make sure it stays flat. Iron it on both sides. This is the time to insert the nose wire piece, and you'll want to put it inside the mask, of course. If you need to take the pins out of the topmost flap just to make it a little easier to maneuver and get that nose piece in, that's certainly fine, and then just repin the sides. Pin the nose piece in the center as I have it shown here in the picture, and then because you have the little loops at the end, take the pin and you can pin right through those little loops, and that's why I do that, because it just makes the pinning more secure. The nose piece is optional if you don't like it or if you don't have the wire for some reason, but honestly it does make a more secure fit across your nose, and then if you wear glasses or sunglasses, they can fit just over the top of the mask and prevent fogging. I found that it's much easier for me to use ties rather than trying to use rubber bands or elastic. I tried elastic and actually rubber bands too, and it just was too much between my glasses and my hair and everything. I just couldn't get a good fit, and there was a big gap on the sides when I tried to do it that way. Using the ties means that you can tie the top one up around even the top of your head, and then the lower tie can go really around the back of your neck. So you can really adjust them to get the best fit because you want to minimize that side gap. You want it fit as close to your face as possible. So cut the two tie pieces 1.5 inch wide by 35, 36, whatever the piece is you've got. I had a whole piece that had the selvage ends on it, and I like having those selvage ends because that way I can just make a nice knot at the end and it makes a really good tie. So fold it in half lengthwise, iron it, then fold the two halves in towards the center and then iron it again. In order to attach the ties to the mask, position the midpoint of a tie over the midpoint of the mask, just approximately. You don't have to measure it, and then pin it. And you can see here in the example, you want to pin it all down so that it stays. After you've pinned both ties to the sides of the mask, go ahead and sew them down. Because I use the selvage edges for the ends of the ties, I don't bother knotting the ends of the ties when I'm making the mask because it's just not necessary. That saves you some time and saves you some thread. Sew around and close to the wire nose piece. I usually go back and forth at the end of where the wire is just to make sure it doesn't slip out. If you have the open version of the mask, you can insert something that is non-woven into that opening. I've used a piece of paper towel. Some people use a coffee filter. So do some research, use what you have at hand, and then when you're washing your mask, which you want to do whenever you wear it outside, remove the filter or paper towel if you've put that into your mask. The opening is there to make it easier if you want to. Congratulations, you're done with your mask and it's ready to wear. I hope you have good success with this. And, a lot of people are making masks and trying different things. So I think this is going to be constantly evolving. If you'd like written instructions in a template, please visit my website. The address is on the screen. I hope my avatar has helped you through this process. Take care, be safe and healthy. We'll get through this.